So let's get to Philadelphia's premier progressive grocer. Jeff Brown has been in the grocery business his entire life. His company started in the late '80s, but it's since around 2004 that he's been on the front line of racial equity and social justice issues through his 12 supermarkets, many of whom service food deserts. Fascinating, as you'll see, thinker and businessman with a social conscience. He and I have spoken long and often over the last years about the intersection of values and business and how one can align them. And I want to begin, Jeff, with asking you just about your story, because I do think it connects very much who you are. What significance does 40th and Girard have in your life?
So when I was a young boy, my dad was a grocer. He had one store at 40th and Girard with partners. It was maybe a 4,000 square foot, inner city bodega. And my dad worked 7 days a week. He got up early to buy the produce and the meat, and he worked till late at night till the store was closed. And so I asked him, how does this work? How do I spend time with you? He says, well, come to work. So starting at 8 years old, he would take me to 40th and Girard, and I would learn the business. I'd talk to customers, talk to employees, and my dad and I were pretty much the only two Caucasian people in the business. And so to be an 8-year-old kid and to be dealing with a very diverse situation, but not even understanding that that's not normal. I mean, it was normal to us. That's how it was. And when I worked in the store, one thing that was very memorable, I worked hard all day, and my dad told me, I don't really know anything. He can't pay me till I know something. And one of the workers who were training me said, that's not really fair. Everyone should get paid. And he took 50 cents out of his pocket and gave it to me. And this is a worker that didn't have a lot of means. And so my relationship, especially with the Black community, has always been like that. It's always been special. It's been loving from many, many decades, and we've helped each other. And my view of this world's a lot different than most people because of that experience.
First of all, behind you, is that a photo of you with Barack Obama?
Yes, it's Michelle and Barack Obama. We took it at the State of the Union.
Well, that's when I first became aware of you, when I tuned into I think it was 2010 State of the Union. And there's this white guy from Philly sitting with Michelle Obama. And that's when I first started to read about your program. And of course, the connection we had was our founding chairman, Jeremy Nowak, was heavily involved with you at that stage.
He sure was. Yeah, he sure was. God bless his soul. What a wonderful, brilliant man.
Yes, I miss him every day, even when he used to yell at me. I miss that. So, I'm still struck about the supermarket, the grocery experience, because I think I told you that the former owner of the 76ers, Harold Katz, once said to me, his father owned a corner grocery, and he said all that he ever needed to know about business and life, he learned as a 12-year-old in that grocery store. Do you share that?
Yeah, it's quite a fantastic learning experience to be in the grocery business. And I remember thinking how poorly informed my teachers were over my education about business, even when I went to Babson, because when you work with thousands of employees and customers where there's no room for error, you have to get everything nearly perfectly every time, or else your produce will go bad, your seafood will go bad, your meat from ordering, delivery, production, and you're working with a workforce that is not a professional workforce. And so you have a lot of challenges, and you have like 30 different businesses under one roof. And it's quite an intense experience to build your business career. And I often meet top CEOs that have kids worked in the grocery business, and they say the same thing. It was a fantastic environment to learn about a very intense business situation that's helped them the rest of their lives.
Well, but what I always had trouble getting my arms around was I've always heard that supermarkets are famously low margin businesses. How did you figure out that somehow serving food deserts, that there was a business model there as well as a values alignment?
So this is something I worked a lot with Jeremy Nowak on, because we knew that almost all supermarkets went out of business in food deserts historically over many years. And there had to be a financial reason for that, a business model reason. And so I started the solution by understanding the cost of being in an impoverished area in the food desert circumstance. And Jeremy Nowak and I were able to figure out that there's about a 5% of sales financial gap in serving the poor versus a middle income community. And so once we realized that this isn't a racism issue, this is a finance issue, and it needs to be solved with a finance solution, that's when Jeremy and I got to work on the Fresh Food Financing Initiative to develop a public-private partnerships to mitigate some of that 5% gap. And on average, a lot of our deals, about half the gap was mitigated through financial strategies, public-private partnership, financial strategies. The far more interesting part is the rest of it. And the rest of it is just being a good entrepreneur and understanding it doesn't really matter someone's race. It doesn't matter what income they have. You're there to solve problems. You're there to serve. And the better we listen to our customers, we started with town hall meetings to understand what other grocers did wrong. They communicated to me that they were treated poorly. They often had bad quality merchandise, didn't have clean stores. They assumed because they were poor, they didn't want what everyone else wanted. They were often charged more. So other grocers tried to fix the gap by charging more. Not a good way to fix it. Or paying employees less. Not a good way to fix it. It feels a lot like racism when you do that. And so what I began to learn is that, especially in low income areas, the communities are very diverse. They have different religions, different races. They come from different parts of the world. And what the grocery industry missed is they didn't carry anything that was significant to their culture. If you're talking about Jamaicans, whether it's jerk chicken or aki that they commonly make, or if you're talking about Western Africans and you're talking about fufu flour or hard chickens, and you go, or Muslim customers who need halal meat, we went on a journey of understanding our customers, their religion, the things they celebrated, and one by one, we figured out how to do what it is they wanted done, that none of my competitors, still to this day, have ever even tried to emulate. And that represented a very significant increase in volume because we were able to sell our customers more stuff that no one tried to sell them before.
It's fascinating. I was with you once in one of your stores, and you showed me you bring a rabbi in to make sure that the wines are kosher or the food is kosher. It's really paying it. It's tried and true customer service.
It's not all that unique. And I think if the customers were affluent, people would understand you need to do that. And I think for some reason, people's mind go in a wrong direction. And they think because a person isn't affluent, they don't want to be served. And that's ridiculous. We all want to be served. Yeah. And the whole importance of the free enterprise system is for business people to focus on doing a better job of solving problems and solving your customers' problems, their needs, taking care of their needs. And so all we did were basic business ideas, but we learned a great deal, and we do it very authentically and very consistently.
Well, the other thing you did is you've created, and I wonder how intentional this was, your stores have become de facto community centers. You go beyond what a grocery store has typically done, and they're meeting places, there's healthcare. Talk to me about that. Was that intentional?
Yeah. What would happen is we'd have these town hall meetings, and the community leaders and customers would say, "You did a good job, Mr. Brown, solving this problem we gave you last time we met with you. So we want to give you some more things to work on." And once the food was very good, they started to go into, "Can you fix our healthcare problem? Can you fix the crime in our neighborhood and the homicides? Can you fix?" They kept on growing the list. Can you fix the problem that returning citizens can't get jobs? And over the years, as we learned about these different problems, we started to experiment with different solutions. And we know that there's a desert of financial services, and we were able to get a relationship with a credit union, American Heritage Federal Credit Union, that allowed my customers to have a free account without any money, that they could cash their checks, and they could get all non-predatory services. The government's worked on solving that problem for like 50 years. And all you needed was a free enterprise solution for it that we could figure out the business model to make it work. And all of a sudden, they don't need check cashing stores and payday lenders because they have a legitimate financial institute. And healthcare was the same thing. We needed a division of a federally qualified healthcare center to make the business model work. And so this has been very much a combination of caring and business model and finance. How to use the tools of business to solve social problems.
Wonderful. I think that you really led in this way. This was, in 2008, 2009, people weren't talking about social entrepreneurship. The whole B Corp thing was just in its infancy. So you were really doing on the streets what has come to be an international movement.
And my customers and I didn't know that. We only knew we were trying to solve the problem they had. The other thing that I think is important that we didn't mention, there are race relation challenges. And I am white, and most of my employees are Black. And they're of various religions, and they come from different places in the country. And there is a little doubting each other or suspect of each other's intentions. And we had to figure out a way to bring us all together as a team. And what we had figured out to do, which was new to me, is that we had to have a purpose or a mission that was beyond the business transaction that we all could buy into. And ultimately, we had figured out that we're not just a grocer, we're there to bring joy to the lives of the people we serve, and that we needed to educate our team on that so we could all buy into that and look past our concerns about each other. And that was really a big change for us, because a lot of people totally changed their attitude about working for us, because we were in a social objective to solve a problem for their community, and we had agreed on the roadmap to do it. And that really made a big difference.
How do you do that? How do you create a culture or change a culture so that becomes the order of the day?
So we started out by asking, what do we really do for a living? What do we want to do for a living? And we had a cross-functional team, people at every level, and we came up with the mission: bring joy to the lives of the people we serve. And the second is, that's very lofty. How do we break it down into bite-sized objectives that we could work on? And so whether it's authentic products, affordability, our community involvement, we broke them down to 4 pillars. And then we detailed everything we were going to do to accomplish them. So it's no longer lofty. It's an everyday part of our job. It's very, very understandable. And what's amazing is highly educated people struggled with it, and everyday people totally got what we were doing. And so often we would be able to get people to full speed and doing a fantastic job. It turned out less education was often better, because we could teach them exactly our thinking of change, and they totally got it. Matter of fact, I've been accused by a lot of my employees of being a missionary. They told me they were missionaries before. It's the same kind of system that they used in their missionary work around the world. And that's what really made a difference for us.
Culture beats everything, I think. And when was it that you began hiring returning citizens, and how much of your workforce is comprised of returning citizens?
So the whole program started about 15 years ago in a town hall meeting, and they had their list of stuff. They were ready for me, and a customer very articulately explained the problem of mass incarceration, how many people have been incarcerated. And she said to me, if you think about it from a business perspective, you may not be able to continue to serve us if you don't show the world how to fix this problem, because we're never going to get jobs like other neighborhoods that don't have this problem. And you're the kind of person we think you could solve this problem. We want you to go and hire some people and figure out a way to do it and show the world that they're not permanently broken. And we had a little reservations at the very beginning of it, but we went and hired 6 returning citizens. That was our experiment. And that was in the Parkside store. So this is dating back about 14 years. And what we were very open-minded about it. We didn't prejudge it because we didn't know what we were getting into. And what we learned is some of them, especially the ones that were in the drug trade, had business skills. They called everything different names, but they understood shrinkage, customer service. They understood managing people, inventory management. They all called them different names, but the same ideas. And we were able to take that and develop them into managers. And some of them are even store managers today. And we realized that among that group, there were things we noticed that were problems, but not the ones we thought. It was not a problem with theft or violence or anything like that. Sometimes they didn't know how to talk to people of the opposite sex, and we could teach them that in a business place, this is how you do it. They use a lot of street vocabulary, and we taught them you could use that in the street, but in the business place, you can't use that. And so over time, we learned all the things they needed to know, and they very quickly learned those things and become really good employees with almost no turnover. What's incredibly interesting about the returning citizens, not a lot of people give them opportunities. So a friendly workplace is very valued. They're very loyal to it, and they stick with it, and they suffer through work that other people may find challenging. But they're very committed to not going back to jail. And once they start to take off and see success, everything changes, and they become like the rest of us. They have families, they want to buy a house, they have kids, they teach Little League, and they're like every other American.
How much of your workforce is comprised of?
We have about 700 out of 2,500 employees now.
That's wonderful.
And tons in management today.
That's wonderful. You've shared with me some stories, one particular young man I spoke to a few years ago that you who blew me away how impressive he was, and what your observation about particularly those in the drug trade and how entrepreneurial they are reminded me of Michael when I interviewed Michael Rubin of the billionaire CEO of Fanatics, who through Meek Mill had an awakening about racial justice, and in one of his prison visits he said, "Oh my God, if I had been born in North Philly, I'd have been Pablo Escobar because there it's entrepreneurship." So I've seen that. And by the way, there's a comment here from Jan that says this guy's brilliant. He should hold a class for today's politicians. And I think I ought to cop to the fact that that I've spent the last couple of years trying to get you to run for political office. But you've wisely shut me down each time I've asked if that's in your future. Do you rule that out entirely?
Well, I'm very interested. If you ask me, what do I want to accomplish in my life? I want to majorly impact structural poverty and inequity in our city and our region. And I started out in a for-profit business, and I quickly expanded to nonprofit businesses, and now I have some government appointments to try to accomplish that, and each of them are a piece of the puzzle to try to accomplish that. I would like to avoid elected office, but I wouldn't rule it out completely because I'm very frustrated with the system. And at some point, they're going to get me frustrated enough that I'm going to say, I'm not going to take it anymore.
All right. Well, so I'll keep bothering you on that front. But well, let's get to that, because you and I have talked about your program, the things you're thinking about in terms of eradicating or at least engaging poverty. And most recently, I just love this. There's the PA 30-Day Fund. And by the way, one of our partners tonight, I should have acknowledged them earlier, Fitler Club, will be hosting you and the other founders of the 30-Day Club for a more in-depth discussion. But along with Jeff Bartos, the former lieutenant governor, and Richard Phillips, who is one of the smartest Philadelphians I know, you guys did something that is groundbreaking. You basically raised a bunch of money to give to small minority businesses who were sort of locked out of the federal and state and local legislation during COVID-19. Tell me about that, and where does it stand?
So it started with a friend of Jeff Bartos in Virginia that started the Virginia 30-Day Fund. And they built the infrastructure, the computer infrastructure and the system to be able to process a large number of small business applications that would be simple and quick to fill out, that could help us assess who would be the wisest small businesses to contribute the money to. And so Jeff Bartos and Richard Phillips came to me and we talked about it. And I was thinking that my business, it's tough with COVID, but we're open. And the government's not giving us direction, but we're figuring out how to keep people safe. But what would happen if my business was closed for 4 months? Rent, utilities, and health insurance, who would pay that? I mean, it would just put everyone out of business. And I think about especially the inner city neighborhoods I serve, they're so underserved and they have so few businesses and so few minority-owned businesses. How could we stand by and let them go out of business? The damage could take decades to repair. And so I said to them, I think we should do it. And I think we should go big or go home. And let's save 1,000 businesses, mostly in Philadelphia. And we got started. And within a couple of days, we had our website up. We're getting applications and money started to come in. And as of today, which I want to say it's only been maybe 10 weeks, we've been in existence. We've brought in, with all our commitments, about $2.5 million.
Wow.
Ira Looper made a fantastic commitment, a matching grant of $1 million, which we haven't brought in enough to earn the whole million yet. But their contributions as little as $3. And we always talk about the police officer that felt bad about how things are going in the city. And she contributed $1,000, which I know that's a lot for a working person. So we have a lot of robust contributions, and if I want to save 1,000 businesses, we need $3 million. So we're still a little short. And so far we funded 450 businesses. Now, most of them are minority and women-owned businesses in the city, but we are open to the whole state. And we have funded businesses in about 40 counties so far. And we do have people on the board that are familiar with some counties that I've never been to in my life, and I didn't even know they existed. And things, in some ways, are different, but in a lot of ways, they're not. They've still been closed 3-4 months. They still can't make their rent, their payroll, their health insurance, their utilities, all that stuff. So it's the same problem. And what's really interesting about it is we divide up the calls amongst us. I prefer all minority businesses in Philadelphia, but the person who's in Carlisle prefers the ones in the rural part. And we call the people up and we talk to them about their business, what's going on. And eventually, once they tell us everything, we tell them that we've awarded you the forgivable loan. And will that get you reopened? Are you having other problems? And we basically work with them to see if there isn't a way we could fix whatever remaining problems exist so they could stay in business. And we've done that 450 times so far, and anxiously working to get to our goal of 1,000.
Well, and I know from talking to Jeff Bartos that you could tell it in telling the story, he started to choke up. This has become an emotional thing for you guys. Is that right?
The emotional part is these are really good people. These are the foundation of the American experiment. The people that took risks, they're not big business people, they're not wealthy, but all the people we funded tend to be incredibly dedicated to their communities and make things work in tough circumstances through all kinds of ways they can contribute. And to see them suffering like that is just very emotional. Like, how could we have allowed this to happen? And they applied for PPP and they were turned down. And they applied to the state program and they were turned down. And when you find out why they were turned down, they're very easy to understand explanations, because the government didn't understand how small businesses work. A lot of small businesses, they operate out of their own checking account. They have a doing business as. They follow income tax on their personal income tax return. That would all be reasons to be disqualified in government programs. Some of them were returning citizens or formerly incarcerated. The federal government disqualifies the formerly incarcerated. And so these were gaps that were really not smart gaps. And so what's important about this is we're filling a gap in the federal, state, and city program that wouldn't be filled any other way, and saving these businesses.
The other thing, it's pretty cool for these mom and pops store owners to get advice and mentorship from people like you, Jeff Bartos, Richard Phillips. That has a value in and of itself, which I think is and I wonder if there's a model like this going forward. I know you were thinking about this as just a bridge, but given what you guys have unearthed, the need, I wonder if this isn't something that government ought to help fund, but get out of the way of operating.
We have the sense that we've learned something, and this has a purpose to exist. And we have to figure out what it looks like. But as we talk to these small entrepreneurs, they have told us that the conversation was worth as much as the money. And I could tell you stories about it, how we've been able to, in a very short period of time, help them solve problems and overcome challenges that they had no one else to go to. So it's a very interesting part of this.
The loan is $3,000. Is that right?
It's up to $3,000. It's a forgivable loan. So until it gets forgiven, you don't need to pay tax on it. That's why it's a good structure. And our hope is that people turn around and then take that $3,000. We don't want it back, but go give it to the next business and save another business. That's our hope. And a lot of people, they're defining their success in doing that. They tell us they're very interested in playing it forward.
That's terrific. I know I want to get to questions. We have some great questions, but before we do, you've given a lot of thought to what this moment requires, especially around. You and I agree that the most pressing economic issue we face is workforce development, and I believe you're on the state workforce development board. What is the need when it comes to workforce development? What should we be doing that we're not?
So the workforce system was designed, it's a patchwork system pretty much laid out by the federal government over a period of time, which is a very complex and cumbersome system that isn't really designed per se to help anyone that wants to be an entrepreneur. It's not set up for that purpose. And it's kind of designed to almost not help the most needy people. And I'll tell you why. The federal government, to protect our taxpayer dollars, hold the local workforce boards to achieving a certain average pay. And they like benefits too, if they could. And so if you're required to hit $12.50 or $15 an hour in benefits, how many of the most needy people that have been formerly incarcerated that didn't graduate high school are the employers going to want when they could get someone who doesn't have all those problems? And so we ended up building a system, and I'm not trying to criticize, I'm the chairman of it, so I'm not trying to criticize my work and my team, because a lot of this is laid out in stone in the federal guidelines. We built a system that really doesn't help the people that need to help the most. And it needs to be reformed. But why it's trying to be reformed, and I certainly am trying to do that in our state system, I think there needs to be other players involved. And for example, Uplift, the nonprofit I founded, started Uplift Workforce that specifically targets formerly incarcerated individuals and people that are still incarcerated. And we train them to do various jobs where we have employers that commit to slots every 6 weeks. And we specifically train to fill those slots, and we train them on the job they're going to have, and we train them on how to be successful at work and life. And we've had incredibly good outcomes. But one of the reasons we have such good outcomes is we don't take hardly any government money, and we won't accept any of their rules. We make our own rules based on a very successful outcome. And so really the government should learn by that and reform to offer that flexibility to people who could deliver.
I think that's very insightful, and I won't hold my breath for the government learning from that scenario. Let me go to the questions here. I still have a ton for you, but I don't know if Michael Adler is out there and wants to join on screen. If he does, let me move on and ask. I'll read you a question from Sandy in the audience. At least two of your stores are Fresh Grocer locations. I know this is because the family that launched the Fresh Grocer joined the ShopRite cooperative, but hearing you talking about stores being responsive to their communities, I know most of the Fresh Grocer stores are also located in underserved neighborhoods, and the one near me also stocks products targeted to its neighborhood. What is the difference between the two? Why did you open your Wincoat store as a Fresh Grocer?
It's a really interesting question. I actually thought of this idea in a Baptist church. I did a presentation. It was like a town hall meeting type of setup. And there were some well-dressed ladies there that pulled me aside, and we were just chatting. And I asked them if they shopped in the nearby store in Cheltenham. And they said, no, they don't shop. They love me and they love what I do, but they don't shop at Cheltenham. And I said, well, why would that be? And they said, it's very busy and it's a little overwhelming. And we were looking for like a Whole Foods to shop in this neighborhood. And I said, well, it's not very likely that Whole Foods would come here. And they said, well, why don't you build us something like that for us? And I thought that was an interesting question. If there's one thing I learned is don't prejudge what customers want. Listen to them and serve them. And so I wondered if I built something leaning in the Whole Foods direction, would my customers that maybe had a higher educational level, maybe a little bit more affluent, would they be willing to spend a little more money to get, sort of more modern merchandise? And we tested it in 2 stores. So we took the Fresh Grocer brand that came from Pat Burns, but we didn't use it exactly the way he used it. We tried something new. And, it looks like it's been a success. We bifurcated the market. It's really more on education and sort of having a modern eating philosophy. And the customers pick which store they want to shop in. So it was an interesting thing, and I'd like to do more of it.
That's great. That's wonderful. There's Michael Adler, who comes to all of our events and who shares my preference for hairstyle. Michael, what's on your mind?
Hi, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Larry. My question has to do with a pay it forward model. We've never met, I think, in person, actually, Mr. Brown, but I'm an attorney and I represent someone in Philadelphia who about 3 years ago, I was advising him and we were connecting together. He ran a pizza shop where people would give him an extra $1.
Oh, Roses.
Exactly.
I know him. He's a fellow Babson grad.
That's right. So I know there was, without getting into attorney-client stuff, I know that the two of you tried to work out a program, but can you discuss why perhaps it works or doesn't work consistent with your pay it forward model of why we can't just drop an extra few bucks at the grocery store so that other people can get produce at no extra charge at your store? In other words, like a pay it forward model that was very successful at his stores for about 5 years.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we actually do have something like that. It recently came to our attention because of the coin shortage. And we're worried we may not have change for customers because the Federal Reserve, and I don't know how they don't have this right after all these years, did not produce enough coin. And so there's a massive coin shortage.
The signs are up everywhere. There's no coins anywhere.
So we've been working on that. And one of the things we did is you could bring your coin to us and drop it in a machine and we'll give you cash for it. But my wife, Sandy, came up with the idea, a pay it forward model that you could donate your change to Uplift. Uplift has another division called Philly Food Rescue. And the Philly Food Rescue model takes excess food in the food system from distributors, grocery stores, and restaurants and redistributes it to our partners like the Philadelphia Housing Authority. So we could move underprivileged people from a processed food diet to a fresh food diet with no cost. And so we do have that program to pay it forward, but we weren't able to. We tried really hard to do it the way Rosa did it, and we couldn't get it to work. And he tried to help us. He really tried very hard to help us. And, I think if there's one thing you learned is the idea could be right, but you have to experiment with how you deliver it. You may not get that right away. The way it really worked for us is electronic and simple. So the customer could say, all right, I'll donate my 10 cents. In his model, you got to fill out a piece of paper and it just wasn't good for a mass volume store.
Yeah, he had the Post-its on his wall.
Yeah,
where you
which
could
was
write it down.
really cool, but it just didn't work in our environment.
Yeah, but people still, I think, would give $1, $5 if there was a pot that then you could distribute the cash.
They're doing it. You're right. They are doing it, and don't be surprised. Some of the lower income stores give more than the more affluent stores.
I bet.
And I'm surprised every time, even though I know that's sometimes true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the question,
Michael. Here's another question that is something I wanted to get to. I was impressed at how quickly you got the West Park store back up and running. I heard from a security guard. I know that you and other merchants there called the police the night of the looting, but no police were there to respond because they were all in Center City. Does this point to a need to change how police do their work here?
Well, I think most people realize there needs to be some reform in police. And what's interesting, at the same time, you might have too much force on some people, but you might not have the protection other people need. So you kind of failed both ways. And, we have a new police chief that's brand new, and I'm sure that didn't help. And Brian Abernathy, I'm not sure he went through this. He was the managing director. And I think the police and him got overwhelmed. And they did let us get looted for 15 hours straight in the West Parkside store, which really, really destroyed the store badly. But bad things happen. And we needed to focus on our mission, bring joy to the lives of the people we serve. We knew that people didn't have access to food while we were closed. We donated all our fresh merchandise to our community to keep them going while we were renovating it. And we worked 24/7 and did whatever we had to and got that store open in less than a week. And same with the Fox Street store. So my parents, we were fourth generation grocers. And in the 60s, my dad's store was looted for the same reason or a similar reason. And in my mind, when you have an unmet need, when people are suffering and society just never, ever does anything to fix it, people boil over. And unfortunately, the person who pays the price is the person who's right in front of them. And, when they didn't let people in Center City, they forced them into neighborhoods. And that made our store in the path of the looters.
I also think I read that some of your customers helped protect your store.
They did. By 12 stores, the rest of them didn't have looting. In some cases, there was customers that protected them. And when we did have the looting in Parkside, hundreds of people showed up the next day to help clean the store up and fix it. They volunteered to do it. So we have always had a loving relationship with our customers, and people that don't know better don't understand that my customers weren't the problem. The community wasn't the problem. This was a different problem, and they get confused about that.
Great point. Let's welcome Ida. Hi, Ida.
Hi, Ida.
Hi. Oh, I'm muted. Hi, how are
you? What's on your mind?
Oh, I'm a board member with an organization in New Jersey called Cookwell, and we work with returning citizens. And one of the struggles that we have is that we teach them culinary skills and life skills. And one of the problems that we have is that we just can't get them to stay in the program long enough to get good jobs. Like, we have partnerships with grocery stores that have like cooked food, and we have partnerships with restaurants, but we just can't get them to the finish line.
So I'll tell you what we did to solve that problem at Uplift Workforce. A couple things. One is we give them tokens to get to our training center. So we pay for their transit, or we'll pay for their Uber ride. And we also give them a stipend. And I'll tell you why that's important. They have nothing. They left prison with absolutely nothing, the shirt on their back. And a lot of times they don't have a way to get to the training program. And so giving them the token gets them a way to get to the training program. Giving them a stipend, and we feed them because they don't have any food. They have nothing. And so we found if you treat them, if you address their needs, they show up. And our statistics, I want to say our graduation rate is about in the 90% range. with the Uplift Workforce Program, using that. Now, it costs a little more to do those things, but you don't have a high quality output without it. So you need to spend that money. And our recidivism for our trainees in the 6-week program, I think we're in our 4th year, is running about 2%. So we have worked on, just like it's a business, we've worked on how do we improve the outcome? What do we need to spend money on? What could we save money on to get more positive impact socially for a lower cost? And so I don't know how your program compares, but ours runs about $3,000 a person in cost for our 6-week program. So basically, we're turning a life around with a high success rate at $3,000 a person. One of the other elements is our employers, we make them guarantee slots. So we know we have a job for everybody. And so absolutely every graduate gets a job. And that also keeps them going to the program because they know there's a job at the end of the program. So that's what I'd suggest. I think if you want to come to the program, we'd love to host you and you could see what we do. Introduce you to our team.
Oh, how do I do that?
Get me on social media. I'll introduce you to the team.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ida.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your work.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff, I see in the chat section that Lori Jones, who is the new, she's a superstar and the new ED at Philabundance, has reached out. So we got to make that connection between you and Lori.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very excited for what she could accomplish there. I think they made a good choice.
So I still have a really long list of stuff. We haven't. You said this is we go for 2 hours. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to walk us through the whole soda tax thing. When you came out against the soda tax, what it became clear to me was that there was a governmental misunderstanding of your business. My understanding is that the beverage tax did not make a big dent in your soda sales. They went down, but not terribly much. So the mayor and others said, well, why do you care then? Walk us through why that mattered.
So for the first thing, you have to remember, I'm a little different in that I'm interested in structural poverty and inequity. And in the surface, this is a tax like a lot of sin taxes that basically it's paying the bills of the city on the back of the poorest people. So right off the bat, this goes against everything I'm trying to do. The second thing, as far as business impact, it did reduce beverage sales, which is not the problem. It reduced them 60%. So that's not a little, but that's not the problem, because my overall sales were that the soda sale loss was not the problem. The problem is once we were twice the price on soda, the tax being doubling our price, in all our bordering stores, all of them in food deserts, the customers that did a little better, that had transportation, left and went to the suburbs to buy their soda. When they were there, they bought their groceries. So
they would go, they're not going to just go to another store to save on the tax. While they're there, they're going to do all their grocery shopping.
Right. And that impacted our stores. Overall, we were down 15% in revenues. And we have a very carefully planned business model that counted on all those revenues, because we have a lot of extra expenses non-food desert businesses don't have. And once you mess with my business model, you made stores that at least broke even or made a little profit, you made them massively unprofitable. And, some of the stores were down as much as 25% in revenues. And it created a problem that we had 4 losing stores out of the 12, one of which we sold, and the other 3 are still a struggle. And so this is a really bad tax. And the evidence I've seen, which now it's been many years, is nobody changed their behavior. The amount of sugar that's consumed in Philadelphia is exactly where it was before. There's been no demonstrated health outcome improvement. And so this was just a bad, mean tax.
Well, and that was never part of the rationale. The rationale was never like we're gonna tax this and improve Philadelphia's health. The rationale was we're going to tax this so we can fund pre-K and rebuild for Johnny Doc. But your first point, I think, is critical, which is what sold me on the illogic of the tax, which was that it's by definition regressive, right? You can't be a progressive and increase the burden on poor people. Now the answer to that was, well, no one's telling poor people they have to buy sugary beverages. What's your response?
Well, it doesn't matter if you have a choice if you really don't have a choice. That's just a political game. So all the economists knew that the volume would be down 50 to 60% in beverages on both sides. They both knew that. So what that's suggesting is the other 50% don't have a choice, that they're going to decide to buy it because it makes them happy, or they're accustomed to it. It's a habit they can't break. And so everybody knew that half the people were still going to buy it, and they were going to be the poorest people. Everybody knew that. And that's the mean part of this. And it's honestly not just beverages. We have a habit as a country to, instead of really dealing with the problems we have and figuring out how to appropriately raise money in a progressive fashion, we have a habit of using sin taxes to pay for things. And so essentially we're telling poor people, you need to pay for all the cost of pre-K. And how's that fair?
You're preaching to the choir here. The other thing, tell me about quickly the Philadelphia Youth Network, because that's also a big part of what you see as one of the things we need to do in terms of confronting poverty. So
I think I've been on the board there, I want to say like 20 years, and I've been the chairman for a lot of years. And Philadelphia Youth Network is a workforce system for Philadelphia for youth. And we organize something like 8,000 or 10,000 summer internships paid. Historically, we have for all these years. We have full year internships. We have something called E3 centers for children that are part of the criminal justice system to help them finish their education and learn how to work. And we have a program called Project U-Turn to improve graduation rates, in which when I started, graduation rates were incredibly only 40% of the kids that went to Philadelphia high school graduate. We made progress, it's up to 60%, but that still means 40% still don't graduate. So if you think about the poverty problem we have, there's a blanket statement that the education system's a problem. But let's be more specific, because I think the problem is smaller than that. The problem is kids aren't prepared to earn a living. And it's really much simpler than the whole education system. And when you're not prepared to earn a living, like you don't know how to succeed at work, you don't know how to be an entrepreneur, then you're going to not have any job, and you're going to be an endless cycle of structural poverty. And so since I've been involved in PYN, Philadelphia Youth Network, I want to say that we have served 100,000 underprivileged youth over the 20 years. And when you go to banks, insurance companies, and professional jobs, and you see a brilliant African-American person, a lot of them have been through our program. In the same token, every year we can't serve 10,000 kids a year that go through the process of filling out the application, really want to be ambitious about their future, and we don't have the money to serve them. And I think it's criminal that we have 10,000 young, underprivileged people of color that want to change and want to be part of a successful future, and we can't help them.
You're absolutely right, and it's one of the reasons I wrote a piece for tomorrow on the Citizen that talks about a new plan from John Hope Bryant, the entrepreneur and philanthropist who founded Operation Hope. It's called a Marshall Plan for Black America, and it's really about talking about putting resources. It's talking about what you've done, what we talked about earlier, aligning our values with our resources and putting together a plan for real equity. We don't see that in any concerted effort. We see it in bits and pieces, and so that even programs that are proven successful, like YPN, don't have the breadth or reach that they ought to. And
that's right.
So if I gave you a magic wand and you could do 3 things right now in Philadelphia, you could make them happen, what would they be?
Well, one thing is in school, more important than any other topic. And I want you to think about this because you're going to understand this. We spend hundreds of thousands on our kids' education. Have you ever seen anything you spend hundreds of thousands on where there's no plan? There's no business plan for the child. Like, it's a simple thing. This is what you're good at. This is what you like to do. These are the kind of careers that you can aspire to go into. What are you interested in? And let's talk about what you need to accomplish in school to get there. Very simple. We don't do it. Now, the state actually mandated it. It's called a 339 plan. They said everywhere in the state of Pennsylvania, they must do that, but we still don't do it because it's an unfunded mandate. I would do that right away because it's ridiculous. In some cases, we spent millions of dollars on individual kids' education through all the levels of school and college, and there's no plan. We don't know what we're trying to accomplish. So how could you get there? First thing. The second thing is PIN should be funded 100%. Every kid that wants to do better, we should give them a hand to do better and teach them how to do better. What I learned from PIN is their first internship sometimes doesn't work out well. They couldn't acclimate quick enough, but the second one's better and the third one's better. And all of a sudden, Bank of America is hiring them to be a loan officer. That's how it works. You need to practice good behaviors. And it's a crime not to take care of every kid that wants to learn how to work. The other thing is we have a mass incarceration problem, and we need to put all those people to work. We need to build the capacity of Uplift Workforce and IDA's program and all the other programs to get the incarcerated people to work. It's a massive percentage of the people that live in poverty. They're in poverty because they can't work because no one will hire them. And there needs to be a plan to release them from the burden of their record at some point, which is another nonprofit I'm on, Philadelphia Legal Society for Social Equity. It's the largest law firm in the state for helping people get pardons and expungements. If a person has a good track record, like I have managers that have been with me 10, 15 years, 20 years, they have a record, they have trouble getting a house and a mortgage, they can't stay in public housing because of their record. At some point, if someone's demonstrated themselves, we have to release them of the burden of their record. And we, on a more systematic basis, need to say, you've met our requirements, you paid your debt to society, now you're totally released. We're totally clearing your record, go make the money you deserve to make. Instead of saying you can only work in these careers for a few employers that are willing to give you a chance. That's what I would do right away. You would find that we would annihilate our poverty rate very quickly if we did those things.
That's wonderful. Jeff, I can't tell you, I was thinking about this earlier, and you and I talked a little bit about it beforehand, that, there is nothing inevitable about a city. In fact, it's kind of illogical. Let's take all these different people from all different, who look different, who come from different backgrounds. Let's make them live together on top of one another, and let's see what happens. And increasingly in our history, it's citizens like you who figure out a way, who demonstrate the way forward. Like you, like Jane Jacobs, and I'm so thankful that you're in our community and leading our community, and thankful that you took the time to talk to us tonight, and hope that maybe we do this again, because I still have a list of topics here that I want to hear you out on. I also want to say that we didn't do this last night because it was your anniversary. So I want to wish a happy anniversary to Sandy, who is a saint for putting
up. She is a saint.
How many years?
31 years we've been married, and I couldn't do what I do without Sandy, who a lot of times takes a back of the house role to organize, to plan, to do the PR. Why she still works full time in our business, and she's taken on increasingly more responsibilities. So, a great part of success is having a good team and a good spouse is part of that. That really is behind you.
Well, that's wonderful. Happy anniversary. Thank you for doing this. To the citizen community, we'll see you next week with the Birmingham, Alabama Mayor, Randall Woodfin, who I think has a great future in national politics. And so I hope you join us for that. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jeff.